Mr. Shapps, always a pleasure. Thanks for taking the time. Cut taxes by £17.2 billion. That's what you're saying in your manifesto. Cutting welfare spending by £12 billion, £6 billion. Tax avoidance. Are those figures about right? Have I got that about right? I'm sure you'll correct me if I haven't.
I think you've got that exactly right, Kate.
OK. And the IFS says it's difficult in the extreme to be able to make those numbers work.
Well, I also saw... Well, first of all, on the welfare side, I don't think that will be particularly difficult. It's important to know that the welfare budget has ballooned post-COVID by, I think, about 34 billion. And we're suggesting 12 billion. That will be reduced. And we'll do that by investing in, for example, a 50% increase in support with mental health and talking therapies and help get people back into work. And the second thing I'd say is on the tax avoidance side of things, the IFS have also said, I think Paul Johnston has actually said overnight, that he was sceptical we would be able to do it the last time. And in fact, we've managed to do £6.4 billion per year on the same, using the same approach. We're talking about £6 billion in total on this occasion. So I think, yes, challenging, but I think our record shows it can be done.
We should say Mr. Johnson is the bloke in charge at the IFS, just for the benefit of our viewers who might not know him. You also know, our viewers also know, Ed Conway. He's been crunching the numbers, and he says tax spending will be higher in 28-29 than it is this year.
When you say tax spending, do you mean taxes or the total amount of spending in the
exactly,
economy?
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, we are working to bring down people's taxes, and people will recognise that themselves because they've seen £900 off through those national insurance cuts. And we've said we'll go further on national insurance. And actually, by the way, for anyone who's self-employed watching this, we're going to completely scrap the national insurance payments that the main rate that self-employed people make. So we've said we're going to do that. And then we've also shown how the whole thing stacks up. So there's a document published alongside the manifesto, for those who are really interested. You can download, you can see the numbers actually in that document. So this is fully funded. We've gone through this with a fine-tooth pick or comb, as you'd expect from this Prime Minister, a former Chancellor. And we've set out all of the numbers and why this stacks up. And as you say, it adds up to about a £17 billion tax reduction.
Just to clarify, will the tax burden, let me put it that way, be higher in 28-29 than it is this year?
No.
Sorry?
No, it won't be.
Have I lost you?
No, I'm here.
It won't be. So these figures are wrong. OK, so because I thought it was 36.7% rather than 36.5% of GDP, which it is today. Those figures are wrong?
So the year, I haven't seen Ed Conway's figures. The year that we target is the last year of the Parliament, so 2030. And in that time, we would see a reduction in the overall tax burden, not least because we've already, as people know from their own pay packets, cut a third of national insurance. And then we set out how we'll go further in reducing that national insurance burden in particular.
OK. Does the freezing of personal allowances equate to a tax hike?
It would do if it weren't for the fact that we've also massively increased. So if you look at our entire record in government, and I occasionally hear people say, oh, because personal allowances haven't risen every year, people are paying more tax. No, in fact, people are paying less tax overall because we've both taken the personal allowance from less than £6,500 to over £12,500 and now started slashing national insurance. So the overall tax burden has fallen over that time, even with the frozen allowances.
I thought we were paying more tax now than we had done in 70-odd years.
Well, there are always lots of different ways of working out how much you're paying in tax. But for example, the changes that have been made, and I've got the numbers right here, the tax thresholds since 2010 show the average earner is £1,500 better off than they would have been otherwise. And it's also true to say that the average earner in this country is paying less tax. So, as I say, we've both pulled the threshold, more than double the threshold, where you pay any tax on your PAYE, and started to scrap national insurance, and all of those things are obviously adding up to more money in people's pockets.
OK, so we're not paying more tax now than we have for the last 70-odd years.
That's right. If you're the average worker in this country, you'll be paying less. And actually, I was looking at these figures compared with international comparisons, and our average workers do well compared with other countries in the G7. Look, really, this goes to our aspirations. We're a party who want to cut people's taxes. We think that when you work hard and you go out and you do the right thing, that you ought to be able to keep more of that money. And so we have presented a plan that will carry on path we've already taken of reducing taxes.
OK, let me ask you
Labour have a plan. I was going to say Labour have a plan that will add £2,094 to the average household's tax bill.
OK, let's talk about what the Conservatives are doing, not Labour. Let me ask you another item that was in your manifesto as it relates to housing. You say that you're going to build 100,000 more houses than Labour. Just remind us what you promised in the last manifesto and whether or not you matched what you said you would do.
Well, I know that we've built a million houses, and we're going to say that we're going to build 1.6 million houses in this period ahead of us. And we've described how we'll do that by making it easier to build on brownfield land, easy to build in towns, by removing some of the legacy EU laws, which are making it harder.
But did you match your manifesto that you promised in the last manifesto for the 2019 election? When you said you were going to build 300,000 new homes a year, did you?
Forgive me, I don't recall the specific number, but let's say it's 300,000.
I'll help you. Let me help you. Let me help you. Let me help you. 2019-20, 248,000, fell to 217,000 in 2021. We could talk about the pandemic there, of course. The latest figures just under 235,000 houses a year, as opposed to the 300,000 that was promised. Even before the manifesto, even before the pandemic, you didn't build a number of houses that you said that you were going to. So why should we believe you this time?
So a couple of things here. First of all, I think it's about 1 million houses we built in total. You already pointed out the reason why we wouldn't be able to build them all, which would have been a 2-year period where it was very difficult to get a lot of construction done during the pandemic. But those numbers you're reading out may not mean much to people, 200,000 plus homes. When I was housing minister, just after Labour were in power, they were only building 100,000 homes a year. House building was its lowest since 1924.
Yeah, I'm talking about you guys, not Labour.
Well, no, the point is, we're comfortably building twice that number of houses plus.
The point is that you don't keep your promises.
Well, hold on a minute.
The point is you don't keep your promises. So what the manifesto, what's the point if you don't keep your promise?
Okay, I don't think anyone seriously thinks you could have predicted coronavirus. And
I gave you the numbers before the pandemic.
Well, the numbers were building up, as you saw, and 1 million homes. By the way, historically...
Well, you said don't say 300,000 if it's not 300,000. Let me ask you about the fact that Mr. Sunak... Let me ask you... We've talked about that. If I could ask the questions, please. We're going to have a limited time. Unless you want to stay longer, I'm very happy to talk to you for longer. However, Mr. Sunak was late for his ITV debate, and he apologised for saying that... Do you want to talk over the D-Day conversation or not? Good, thank you. Mr. Sunak was late for the ITV debate. He said he was sorry because the D-Day celebrations had run long. Does that not show that he is completely tone deaf when it comes to D-Day?
No, first of all, I was at the D-Day events, and he was there meeting British veterans. The part that he didn't attend had no British veterans at it at all, and he's rightly, I think, issued his apology for it. We can carry on going round and round in circles. I think the more interesting thing is, what does he really think about our veterans? What's his actual belief in this? And he is a prime minister who has, from day one of his administration, had a veterans minister in his own cabinet. I don't recall a time where we've had a veterans minister sit in the cabinet in order to promote all of the interests of veterans, from making sure that they get better assistance, things like travel, making sure that the Armed Forces Covenant is properly put in place, and so on and so forth. So he has done a huge amount for veterans, and that's why I think it is so obvious that his heart is in the right place on this. Because you wouldn't have had a veterans minister sat in the cabinet if that weren't the case.
When a 102-year-old veteran, who many of his colleagues gave the ultimate sacrifice for this country, and he says that he was offended by the Prime Minister, shouldn't he be ashamed?
Well, as I say, the Prime Minister met over 2 days in Portsmouth and then in Normandy all of the British veterans who attended both of those events. And no Prime Minister, I would argue, has done more with and for veterans than this one. There weren't any British veterans at the...
Keir Starmer stayed.
There weren't any British veterans there. And he had spent a huge amount of time, not just at the formal events.
It was a joint operation 80 years ago. That's what they were marking.
And in fairness, okay, he's apologised because he recognises, and I think a lot of people in that situation, a lot of other
and he apologised for being late for a TV debate because the event ran long. Let me ask you one more question before I let you go. Why did you bother having an event at Silverstone when you couldn't actually use the track or anything? You may as well have done it in Downing Street or with a green screen or something.
Well, it was a very nice, good, impressive place to do an event. It's a British success where Formula One in this country, I think, supplies 70 or 80% of all of the Formula One globally comes from here. And as the Prime Minister said as he opened his speech, just as in Formula One, you turn corners, and so has this country with our improved economy, taxes coming down, and it seemed to be a very appropriate place to launch a manifesto, which, amongst other things, shows how we'll build more houses.
Apparently that pesky Brad Pitt was on the track, so you couldn't film. You're only 1 point ahead in the latest polls, ahead of Reform. Does that make it a bit squeaky bum time?
Well, let's see what happens, shall we? As far as I'm aware, not a single person cast a vote in this country yet, so let's wait and see. I know from knocking on thousands of doors that, yes, people do want to know that our plans for the next Parliament are exciting, and this range of tax cuts that we've outlined, which are very well costed, and because we've already started them, people know that will happen, are in vast contrast to the only other option, which is not some other party walking into Downing Street. It's Keir Starmer. And if you believe there's going to be a Keir Starmer government, it's going to be an over £2,000 tax rise for ordinary households. Now's the time to start saving. We're saying a vote for the Conservatives is a vote for a better future with some bold ideas and a secure future. And that is why we're encouraging people to vote Conservative.
Always a pleasure to joust with you. I know we're out of time. I'll get in trouble. I always do. It's good to talk to you, as always. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.